Hello and good morning. My name is Laurel Labonde, and I am the Government Affairs Coordinator for State Farm Insurance and the current chair of the Northern Colorado Legislative Alliance Board of Directors. I have the pleasure of being your MC for the day. Welcome to the 2021 Regional Issue Summit, proudly presented by Northern Colorado Legislative Alliance, the Fort Collins Area Chamber of Commerce, the Loveland Chamber of Commerce, the Greeley Area Chamber of Commerce, and Upstate Colorado. In its 30th year, the NCLA is the policy and political workhorse in the region, promoting our remarkable, diverse, and growing industries and businesses, and importantly, defending them and the economy in the region that we call home, Northern Colorado. Colorado has encountered monumental shifts in our policy climate in the last couple of years, and the NCLA has been on the front line. Today, we plan to explore a full range of issues that affect you, your business, and ultimately your community, with a stellar lineup of speakers made up of Colorado's top elected leaders, administration officials, political media, and issue experts. Before we jump into the fun, let me start with some quick thank yous and a few announcements. First, today's event is only possible because of the strong support of our sponsors. Their logos will run across the screen today, and they are posted on the event website. Please take time to visit their profiles in the expo area of the event. We especially want to thank and recognize our gold sponsors: Elevations Credit Union, FNBO, and UC Health. Thank you so much for your support. We are tweeting today. Join our conversation on Twitter by using the hashtag #NoCoIssues2021. That's all one hashtag, #NoCoIssues2021. We are also recording this session, and all of the materials from today will be available on the NCLA and the Fort Collins Area Chamber website. Please take advantage of the chat box, which can be expanded from the right side of the event screen. It's a place to drop your comments throughout the event. We will also be sharing insights and additional resources there. We want to make the most of your time today, so let's get right to it. I am honored to turn the screen over to Mindy Mcluhan, President and CEO of the Loveland Chamber of Commerce. Mindy?
Thank you, Laurel, for emceeing the event today and your dedication to NCLA. As Laurel mentioned, the shifting political and policy climate in Colorado, and there are no two more individuals in touch with the climate than Joey Bunch of Colorado Politics and Ed Sealover of the Denver Business Journal. Joey and Ed are among the top media sharing the stories that unfold in Colorado's policy circles. And under the Gold Dome, a repeat performance, we are so fortunate to have them join us today to share their unique perspectives on the political dynamics at play in the upcoming legislative session. Joey is the senior correspondent and deputy managing editor of Colorado Politics and brings his own Southern style of reporting on politics. His 33-year career includes the last 17 in Colorado and was part of the Denver Post team that won the Pulitzer's prize in 2013, and he is a two-time finalist. Ed Sealover of the Denver Business Journal brings his own insight to Colorado's political scene. With his focus on business and the policies and politics that intersect it, Ed covers state government, tourism, and the beverage industry. Beer and politics seems a perfect combination, right? Over his journalism career, he has received 77 state, regional, and national awards in categories ranging from investigative reporting to political reporting to public service. And to help moderate our session today, I'm pleased to introduce Sandra Solin, the founder and president of Capital Solutions and NCLA's longtime strategist and lobbyist. So let's get started. Let's begin the day with Joey Bunch. Joey, you're on mute.
How about now? Can you hear me? I'm having some troubles this morning. I was having trouble earlier. What I was saying was, Ed's a lot smarter than I am, so he's going to talk to you guys about a lot of the bills that are coming up this session and what we can do about it. I'm going to talk about politics. And, 2 years ago, I spoke to this group and I said, expect anything. And somebody brought that up last year because, in 2020, I didn't tell you to expect the world to shut down or that you're going to have to stand in line for toilet paper and horse medicine. So I don't know. Maybe you should take anything I predict today with skepticism. But this one feels familiar because for me, three's the charm. Every 10 years, the X factor in state politics is redistricting. They redraw the political boundaries that people represent. In 1991, I covered it in Tallahassee, Florida. In 2001, I covered it in Mississippi. And let me tell you, when you've covered redistricting in Mississippi and Florida, you get a master's degree in political calculus. And that's what we have in front of us this year, a whole lot of politics and not the fun kind. Or the productive. No, I'll take that back. It is the fun kind. It's not the productive kind. But that's not to say I expect to see a great deal of ideological shift this year. Actually quite the opposite. For one, this year is the first time in Colorado that we've had an independent commission draw up the district boundaries instead of the majority party, which this time, and then I'm sure most of you remember, we passed Amendment Y and Z a couple of years ago to set up these independent commissions, which were supposed to take politics out of the process. Like as I say, that's normally an X factor, but this year I'd call it a Y factor because I don't know why they did it. The maps are somewhat based on the last two elections, and those were elections that were good to Democrats. But it just doesn't matter. I don't think it matters that much this time. Of the redistricting I've seen, Ed may disagree with me. I hope he does so we can get more perspectives. But the House is not in play. If you're a Republican, you might as well stay home. Democrats have a 41-24 majority, and to be honest, I don't see that changing a lot in next year's elections. But when you're in the minority like that, in the South, the Democrats were always in the minority. They were always in the Republican position. But, for the last 20 years, the first 10 out in Colorado, Democrats were kind of in the position. But for the last 10, this has been a Democratic state, getting bluer and bluer. But when you're in the minority like Republicans are, you've got to do three things: deal, 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 and that's just not going to happen. And that's not the political environment we live in anymore. For one thing, more and more, I think the true motive to go to Denver is not to make a difference, but the reason Democrats and Republicans go to Denver is to be Democrats and Republicans, not to get things done for their constituents. And half Republicans can't even make a deal with themselves, much less Democrats. So, the party is fractured on the state level, just like it is the national level. Moderates and the conservative base. We're going to see that play out. Unfortunately, it's not good for advancing, well thought out compromise legislation. Maybe I'm wrong about that. Now, the Senate is more interesting because Republicans only need to flip 3 seats to take back the majority in the Senate. And, it won't be easy, but it's doable. And, I see a lot of places it could happen. For one, Colorado Springs, after the maps that we just saw, Colorado Springs, it hasn't been as blue since Zebulon Pike looked at a distant peak and called it a small blue cloud. The districts are good, and the demographics are changing in Colorado Springs. That makes a big difference. But on the other hand, Senator Brittany Pedersen, one of the all-stars of the Democratic Party, her district looks a lot tougher in South Jefferson County. I'm not predicting an upset, but I'm predicting a campaign. And then Tammy Story in, I think, northern Douglas County, maybe southern Jefferson. But anyway, she drove out Tim Neville from the Senate, or a staunch Republican, a couple of years ago and flipped that seat. To be honest with you, I look for that seat to flip back. And then, we've also got an interesting dynamic of interest to you guys in northern Colorado, that we've got Senator Barb Neville, a former county commissioner, who is running against Representative Yadira Caraballo in the northern metro area. And they're both, young young in their career legislators. So I don't know what that means, but you couldn't have two more ideologically different people. So it'll be interesting to see how this new congressional district in the northern metro region is representative after next year's election. You've also got Senator John Cook up in Greeley, who's term limited, and I look for Senator Kevin Priola to wind up being the representative of that region, and he's a lot more moderate than John is. So, that's a shift in politics. We'll have to see. Before we can get to 2023, we've got to get through 2022 and this legislative session. Expect partisanship, but don't expect big change. It's as the book of Matthew says, keep an eye on the sparrow in the Senate. I'm pretty sure that's in the Bible. But it's critical because if you can control one chamber, then you can put up a roadblock to a lot of liberal nonsense. And well, I don't expect any more nonsense this year. In fact, I see less nonsense. What I'm saying is that if you want to get something done, go to a Democrat, but just don't ask for anything big. For one, they've done most of Governor Polis's agenda, and he needs something to run on for a second term. And secondly, they want to make people forget about all of the liberal things they've already done. If you want to find political power, then buy popcorn, because I don't know where you're going to find it this year. Political power and political courage aren't the same thing. It's just like toilet paper in 2020. We might run out of it. And, they spent billions and billions of the stimulus the last year, and, the 2022 is going to be the hangover. My colleague Marianne Goodland put it well yesterday when I was talking to her about this. She said, this year is playing it safe on steroids. Now, somebody who never plays it safe is Ed Sealover. So I'm hoping Ed will give us an indication of what kind of bills he sees coming this session. And, we'll connect that to politics and see what we get on the other side.
So I guess I'll take this and just jump in here. Thanks, Joey. And yes, it is. It's going to be an interesting year. I'm going to slightly disagree, though. I think this is going to be a less safe election year than you normally see. And when we say safe election years, what that typically means is that in 2-year cycles, particularly when the House is bringing in new members, the first year is gung ho. People come in with big bills, big ideas, the things they ran on. And the next year is, hey, let's be careful because the voters may not like some of our biggest ideas. This year seems a little different for a couple of reasons for me. For one, more people are going to be running for a different office this year than any time during the last 10 years because of the redistricting process that Joey just described. So I think people will want to put signature bills out there, even if they are a little riskier, because quite frankly, the old days of appealing to the middle by the legislators are over. At this point, you have to appeal to your base constituents in the Republican and Democratic parties, and you do that with bigger bills, not safer bills. The second reason is there's still a lot of undone work, and I think that's going to be the focus of what we see this year. Now, there's a couple categories that I've divided this into. The first thing is you want to look for bills that are coming out of committees that have been meeting over the summer. There have been 3 particular committees that have been legislatively appointed and meeting, discussing how to divide up about $1.8 billion in so far unspent federal stimulus funds that came into the state last year. One committee is looking at how to put that toward affordable housing. One committee is looking at how to put that toward behavioral health care. And I'm going to focus on the third one, as I think that's more this audience here. That's the Economic Stimulus Committee. They've got about $740 million to play with. And the idea is, what can we do to infuse money to places that did not get it in the economy? Much of the talk, in fact, I would dare say the majority of the talk that committee has done so far has been looking at getting money to the Unemployment Insurance Trust Fund. Now, anyone who's an employer on this knows the Unemployment Insurance Trust Fund is broke. It's been broke since August of 2020, as literally hundreds of thousands of people rushed in to take benefits last year. At this point, in early September September of this year, we began paying interest to the federal government. Their interest-free loans ran out. And so every time we are paying interest, that is setting off a cascade effect where businesses are going to have to pay more. Their rates are going up next year and will be going up for several years because of that. Starting in 2023, a surcharge is set to kick in because the fund is insolvent, and that will stay in place until the fund is solvent again. Now, Governor Polis has proposed putting that off, and I'll get to that in a second. But there are a number of ways that businesses are going to will have to be paying more to pay back the uninsurance trust fund, and that's going to take away from their bottom line, and nobody likes that idea in the legislature. Now, Governor Polis has recommended putting $600 million to try to offset this $1 billion debt we have in the fund right now. $500 million would come from the general fund, $100 million would come from this committee. If you did the math real quickly, you realize that's still not going to pay off our debt, and those solvency surcharges, even as Polis has proposed putting it back to 2024 rather than 2023, are going to kick in and are going to hurt businesses soon. The question is, will this committee kick in more? I mean, will they go for the $100 million of the money that they are recommending to spend, that Polis has recommended, or will they say maybe we should give more? A state like Ohio put enough money into it to shut off its debt completely and to get it back to solvency. I don't know that there's the political will to do that, but I think the fight around the unemployment insurance trust fund is going to be one of the major fights of this session. How much do we put into it to get it paid off? There are also other ideas coming out of the Economic Stimulus Committee, such as potentially direct payments to frontline workers who many felt had been underpaid or who hadn't been working for as much time over the last year to try to stimulate the economy. But the biggest one you're going to see is the debate around the unemployment insurance trust fund. The second major committee that's been meeting that is worth watching is a committee that's looking at potentially seismic changes to the state's tax policy. We're talking about things such as whether or not we tax services like goods. Would you like to pay for your haircut and your massage, or heck, maybe even your accountant with a sales tax the same way you would buy goods that way? We're talking about whether or not to shrink the enterprise zones that are offered, and I know are big in northern Colorado, to try to help economically disadvantaged areas. The biggest debate that's going to come out of that is whether or not we are going to raise the property tax rate on short-term rentals, an idea that hasn't had a lot of supporters now, moving it from the lower residential rate to the higher rate that motels now pay. But that is going to be a big issue, and especially heated when you start talking about taxes. A second thing you're going to look for is continuation of ideas that came up last year. And I think a lot of the focus will be around transportation versus environmental. And I know we're going to talk about this, so I won't dwell on this now, but trust me, there will be pushback to the current rulemaking that is going on that will make it harder to build roads, that are harder to expand capacity on highways unless there is a neutral or lowered carbon emissions measure. That is going to be a big debate, and I don't think it's going to be stuck just to party lines. I think you're going to see more talk about family. Remember this one? This was a huge deal for years and years. The voters passed a family medical leave trust fund insurance program in 2020. We've kind of forgotten about it since then. Guess what? Businesses are going to start paying into it in 2023. And I think there will be debate around exactly how they're going to pay into it, and maybe how it is defined if you have your own program rather than use the state program. So that will come back up. And I think you're going to see more discussion around criminal justice reform in a different way. We've been talking about it for years, and it hasn't been a business issue. Now there is some pushback, particularly from businesses in urban areas across this state, that crime is hurting business and is hurting atmospheres. I think you will see a lot more people saying we need to take steps to curb this crime, and Governor Polis is on board with that in some ways. He's putting more money toward his budget. The third and final thing I will mention is that we will, of course, see bills that did not pass come back. And I think the biggest one the business community is going to watch for is whether or not the Power Act comes back. This is a bill that would reset the standards for what is how people can move forward with sexual harassment lawsuits. It was a bill the business community really pushed against, and even a number of liberal Democrats said, this is too much, we can't reset these standards. That's going to come back. We are also going to probably see more discussions over workers' compensation and whether or not you need to expand the doctor pool and whether or not you need to make it a lot easier to switch doctors. This is something that some business groups have said, this is going to cost way too much. It's going to throw our system for for a loop, but a number of Democrats are saying this needs to be done. It's unfair now. We will be discussing that again. That's the high level, and eager to see how we can expound on this conversation.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much, Ed and Joey, for joining us this morning. I presume all three of us are on screen right now, and both of your perspectives are always so unique and valuable to a basic understanding of what we can anticipate in the next legislative session. The politics and the very issues themselves that intersect make for interesting fodder as we enter into this legislative session. I think, too, as you point out, the issues themselves in an environment in which we have increasing inflation, tremendous pressure upon the business community and individuals, creates an additional layer of dynamic that will be factored. And a question for the two of you relates to both the politics and the management of the politics and the issues themselves, and the pressure that's on legislative leaders in both caucuses as they look towards 2022 and their desire to either maintain majority or regain majority. How do they manage and navigate caucus members who may be pursuing concepts that would be problematic for business, who's becoming much more emboldened in resisting efforts that are problematic, particularly in this economic climate? Ed, why don't we start with you?
Well, I mean, managing caucuses is not the art that it used to be. And I think that's as we've seen more liberal and more conservative members come in over the past decade, it's becoming a lot harder to manage the caucus. I think that was, with the top of Alec Garnett's list, the speaker last year, on how he manages both caucuses. I think there's a couple of ways. In the House, if there, and Garnett has never been considered a moderate or an especially pro-business legislator, but he is considered to be a pragmatic. And I think he has a way of subtly putting things aside when he does not want them to pass, when he thinks they go too far. I think that's really in some ways what happened with the Power Act last year, for example.
Hello, everyone. Our sincerest apologies for the technical problem that we just encountered. And so grateful for you sticking around with us as we get back in motion. The beauty of the virtual platform is that we can all be together from around the state and from around the region and bring in some amazing speakers. But we obviously, technical problems present challenges at times. Ed Sealover, will you? He's still with us, and I know many of you. We dropped off about 3 minutes before we ended our session with Ed and Joey. And I just want to, Joey had to drop off, but I want to express our great appreciation to Ed for joining us this morning and sharing his unique perspective and insights to the critical issues that are facing business community in Colorado. And Ed, if you want to say just another minute in closing, we'll move on to the rest of our program. But again, so grateful for your joining us today.
I just want to say thanks for having me on. Thanks for everyone who is watching this, and thanks for everyone who stays involved with the legislature. It's going to be a lot of things, I think, once again, coming at people, and I would advise you to keep an eye out, keep a watch for what's happening, as I think business is going to be at the center of a lot of these debates once again. So thank you, and for any of you who want to talk business in the legislature, always feel free to be in touch. I'm happy to follow what is going on and help people out.
Great. Well, thank you, Ed, so much. And I highly encourage those who may not have subscriptions to the Denver Business Journal, I encourage you to do so, and Colorado Politics, both of which are tremendous outlets to follow what's unfolding at the State House. And again, through some business lens, which is really, really important. So again, much thanks to Ed and Joey, and to you all for sticking with us through these technical challenges and so forth. So next up, it's my great privilege to welcome our first gold sponsor of the Regional Issues Summit, FNBO. We have a quick video for you, and if we can shift to that real quick. FNBO is a great big small bank with more than 20 branch locations serving Brighton, Boulder, Longmont, Johnstown, Loveland, Greeley, Windsor, Fort Collins, and Wellington communities here in Colorado. They are ranked one of Forbes' best banks in America and the most small business friendly credit card company by Wallet Hub. The FNBO focus has always been community first. And for more than 160 years, FNBO has maintained its commitment to helping to build strong communities as a local bank that understands and embraces its community vision. They're independent and family owned and focused on the long view instead of the next quarter. It's been their recipe for success for generations. We so thank FNBO for your support of the 2022 or 2021 Regional Issues Summit and for your commitment to Northern Colorado.